one tree to make a matchstick, and then you overproduce them, and then the whole forest is gone. So the point being is this guarding against, and that's why progressive taxation is underpinned by guarding against overproduction.
Wholeheartedly, I disagree with a number that high.
What do you think it should be?
I don't know, but I will say.
See, my thinking is it goes from 0 to 100% in a linear line. Now, we as a society get to choose where that hundredth dollar, 100% taxation kicks in, and just put it out there, way off beyond what anyone ever earns. What is the wealthiest person in a yearly's income? You know, is it $1 billion or 20 billion or 100 billion or 1 trillion? You know, I just say that. And that's where you park it. And then there's a linear line that goes from there right down to $1. But for me, I like progressive taxation in the discussion form because we have to address it globally with regards to countries being a part of it. So you get this global perspective as well as a national perspective, as well as a regional perspective, as well as a local perspective, as well as the individual.
We need more progressive brackets. We need to keep going. And,
So when he talks about progressive brackets, it's, this amount and it goes up. All I'm saying with a linear line, it's done. They're just an infinite number of brackets. That's what. So rather than these guys, and that's where they get stuck, by just drawing a line between 100% and 0, and it's linear, not curved or anything, it's got to be linear. You get away from this guy getting into this loop of thinking of which one and how many and all the rest of it. Yeah, so the discussion should be, where do you park it in the yearly income? And that's a much better discussion. And then everyone will agree on it. Because as you get further and further out, less and less people have it. And the one that does have it, well, the area under the graph, you get 50% of everything anyway. So it effectively is 50% is the highest one. But for those high earners, the dollars after that bracket are at 100% taxed, and it encourages them to not overproduce.
I'd say maybe at $10 million, 70% does make sense, but I kind of lean towards not really, because it seems like.
So now they're stuck in the mud. They're bogged down, you know what I mean? And which is fine. This is the conversation everyone will have over their cup of tea, but no policy will come from it. We have to actually produce something, a policy document from it. And that's why I say progressive taxation with a linear line.
Man, that's a lot of money. That's a lot. That's a ridiculous amount. I think Steve Bannon said something like a 5 in front of it or something. But I don't know. I'm not an economist. But I do believe a progressive tax makes the most sense. And I can explain it to you if you want to hear it. Sure.
Yeah, and I want to hear it too. So I haven't listened to this bit. I was going to turn off this and go and do something else. But once he picked up progressive taxation, all ears. Because this video may be a really important video in the process of progressive taxation, as I said before.
So there was a study, I believe it was from Harvard. You need $77,000 per year, this may have been 10 years ago, in order to be middle-class median in the United States. That means if you make $77,000, you'll have vacation, you'll have insurance, you'll have a car, you can raise a family, you can send them to school, all that stuff. But you have nothing left over for savings, you have nothing left over for investments. If you make $100,000 a year, you're going to have $23,000 left over for investing. Eventually, at a certain point, if you only need $77,000, if you're making $10 million, you've got $9,999,000 that you can invest and just be independently wealthy and be rich forever. Now, I have no problem with being wealthy. I have no problem with other people being wealthy and living off of their investments and all that. But there is a point where you have to realize the coalescing of power, the monopolizing of power, is a really dangerous thing for any society. Too few individuals holding too much power can destabilize an economy, can destabilize a country. The problem with communism, you snap your fingers and you put a centralized authority in place. At least that's how it's been every single time. And then they hold all the cards and they can oppress whoever they want. The problem with laissez-faire capitalism is over time, which is why it's better in a lot of ways. Over time, it eventually becomes a centralized oligopoly of a few corporations controlling everything, which we're kind of seeing now. So all a progressive tax can really do is slow that process down, which I think is a good thing. But ultimately, I think.
Okay, so that's an interesting one at a national level, but what I'm suggesting at a global, and we can go, if we're going to Mars, we could do it within the solar system, because obviously that is an important thing. Do people on the space station pay taxation, and who do they pay it to?
Just looking at the system, eventually you end up kind of where we are, where 6 media companies control everything. And then, some companies are the biggest funders of certain politicians and corporations. They just have too much power. I mean, I remember reading a report or a story about how wealthy people have like 3 or 4 times more ability to influence a politician than like the majority of the people in the country, simply because paying for expensive dinners and lobbying earns you favors. Super PACs paying, guaranteeing funding for a politician earns you favors. So it's, look, if a million people tell me they want, X, but the people who are paying me, like funding my campaign, are paying me more, well, who am I going to provide favors to? And then once I'm done with my campaign run, I can go to a job at their company. Yeah, these are problems. So without going on too big of a rant, I think ultimately a progressive tax can help slow the process down of special interests acquiring too much power. Eventually it happens anyway. But with a flat tax, you're basically saying at a certain point, you can just keep dumping more and more money into different investments, making more and more money, and increasing your power exponentially, and other people can't catch up to you. And then power becomes too quick, right?
Yeah, I think in this country, we try to look at success and achievement as something that everyone's striving for, and we don't want to put any restrictions on that.
Yeah.
We look at capitalism as the reason why everything's going so great over here. This is America, land of the free, home of the brave. Go out there and kick ass. We're not going to saddle you down with debt.
So we're in the moment in the pandemic stage. So I'm in New Zealand, but around the world, people are being locking down and staying at home. And it looks like it's about 99.23% survive. They get the coronavirus and survive. So so we're in a really fascinating time, because what that's meant is the flow of people from one country to another has stopped, but the money can still flow from one country to another. So we're in a very fascinating time where people's movements are being restricted. And just on the radio this morning, Chris Hipkinson, the Minister of Education, was saying that they're going to preferentialise teachers coming back to New Zealand because they've got a shortage of good teachers. What a wonderful situation is people overseas who are finding the economies of the countries that they're in or whatever, or job security's gone, and they have a teacher qualification. Once they have 14 days quarantine, they can come back to New Zealand. So that is something where I'm thinking it's a fascinating situation where they're going to cherry pick out of, and that's an important thing. I'm a fan, just for note, I lived on the Chatham Islands, so it produces $1 billion of fish every year, and it is the export contribution, and there's like 600, when I was there 750, but 600 people living there. So the point is, we got 600,000 New Zealanders that have the right to come back to New Zealand. So when they come back, they go to the Chatham Islands. So if you're going to set up out there, well, you need to build some accommodation first. So let's give some preferential treatment to all the builders in the world, and boom, fly aeroplanes from here to pick them up, take some fish and some food and some water as you go to that country, and then you just pick up a whole plane load of builders from that country, and then you fly them out to the Chatham Islands, land there, and boom, away they go, and they start building. Then you fly out and you get electricians and plumbers, and then they do their part, and then the wallpaperers and stoppers, and then eventually you've created a community to bring in the 6, very similar to what's proposed on Mars. You've got to do it in stages.
But it makes sense that after a while, as we're seeing today, but I don't mean, what's the best way to do it? I mean, socialism's not going to work. What does work?
I think a mixed economy.
A mixed economy.
Where we are right now, right? A portion of income is paid in taxes for government programs, for defense and things like that. I just think we have a big problem with corruption. I think we've got bloat. I think we've got government agencies that, instead of reforming and breaking them down, we just slap more Band-Aids on top. We got a festering wound and we're putting bandages over bandages. It's like at a certain point, you got to redo it.
We also have systems that are in place that, I mean, in terms of like the way communities have always existed. In certain communities, there's just poverty and crime, and no one does anything to fix it.
Right.
Yeah, I've just gone through this with the rubbish collection and lockdown on our road, which has the dump. So the trucks drive past it every day that pick the rubbish up in town to drop it off. And I just asked if the old people's rubbish could get picked up. And I went through the annual planning process. And what they're talking about is the systems. So it's a no-brainer. I mean, first of all, when I asked through the newspaper, the CEO could have just rang up the contractor and said, look, it's locked down for essential service, you're still doing rubbish, this road is included. So that didn't happen. Put it in the annual plan. Then when I say put it in the annual plan, I put it in a way because the mayor lives at the end of the road here, and so I just invited that the idea of putting it into the plan gets past the CEO, and then the CEO then puts it in. So they were playing games around, well, yes, we've read it, but it doesn't fit, and that's so they were gatekeepers on this information, and they were saying it wasn't an online submission and stuff like that. And so that was an interesting thing. And then it came up at the meeting, and then the deputy mayor did a personal slight, said waste of time, waste of space. And then that meant the other councillors got upset about this. And the legislation's such that the intent of Parliament is that a person has their say in the community, and nobody can close that down. And so what you were getting is these decisions. They should have allowed it to come to the party and then made a decision on it, but they didn't. They tried to stop it at every pathway on the way through. And from my perspective, it's if the older couple want to ask it, I've got heaps of energy to push it. As a public policy specialist and analyst, it needs to be. I knew what the intent of Parliament was. So that then created a challenge. And so we're in this situation here where we've got the digital divide, where it's so problematic to try and do with anything online because the expert's gone, and then the person who programs it, if they make a mistake and you're left adrift. So we've lost meritocracy. Basically what we've done to get into artificial intelligence, we've lost meritocracy. Anyway, that's not the conclusion of this. It's about a progressive taxation. So back to this.
And it seems to be that we're more than willing to go to other countries and nation build. We're more than willing to pump money into